It's officially Halloween, and of course that means peak time for the Jessicur channel. So tonight we're going to be diving into every RBI story that I have covered so far on the channel. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this compilation. Hi there. I'd like some answers if possible to help settle my mind. Has this just happened for the second time under the exact same circumstances as the first time? And needless to say, I'm freaked. For context, I'm a 22-year-old female living with her parents in the southern UK. The first time this happened, I was scared sick, but was willing to brush it off as a harmless incident. Now, it's happened again, under the exact same conditions as the first time, and I can't help but think it's just too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. A few months ago, my parents took a week-long trip by themselves, so I had the house to myself for a week. I don't drive or have a vehicle, and they took the car, so my driveway was empty for the first time they were gone. I kept the lights on at night and doors locked at all times, and about halfway through their trip, the first incident happened. I like to stay up late at night so I can spend more time with my long-distance partner, so I was easily still awake at 3 to 4 AM. I live in the suburbs, and cars driving around outside my house is unusual at that time of night. So when I heard an engine on standby outside my house, I was curious. I went to peek outside and there was a car right in front of my driveway. It stayed there for about half an hour. During this time, the driver got out, knocked on my door a few times, before sitting back in the car and browsing their phone. They then drove off after about 30 minutes and came back about 10 minutes later to sit outside of my neighbour's house for about another 5 before leaving completely. I was scared shitless. Having strangers outside / trying to interact with my house while I'm home alone is one of my biggest fears. But after I'd calmed down, I was willing to chalk it up to maybe a driver got the wrong address and was trying to find the right one. This would be scary story over if the exact same thing did not literally just happen. Once again, my parents are out of town, car gone, and I'm home alone. It was 4 AM, I was up late talking to my partner again, and I hear another engine running outside my house. This time, it's a motorbike. The driver is staring up at my window, whistling. I can only assume trying to get my attention. My room light was visible on the outside. I hear him knocking my door a few times. He has a phone in his hand and is waving his arms around. I peeped out again from behind my curtains for about 2 seconds. I think he saw me as I moved against my wall, and he walked to the side to try and keep his eyes on me. This made my blood run cold. After about 5 minutes, I hear him talking on his phone. I can't make out what he was saying. Time passes and I hear him leave on his bike. Maybe I am way too paranoid about this, but these 2 instances are literally the only times I have ever seen this happen to my house. What are the chances that both times happen while I'm home alone, no vehicle in the driveway, and at 4 AM in the morning? Please help me gain some peace of mind before I lose it completely. Let's go over this. 2 events where an unknown person has pulled up outside of OP's house in the early hours of the morning. Second time, they knocked on OP's door, whistled at them, and acted creepy. We certainly have an interesting case on our hands. Like OP said, this could simply be a driver making a mistake and pulling up to the wrong house. This is the most unlikely option, however, as for 1, it probably wouldn't happen twice, and 2, there's no reason that driver 1 would have to wait outside for half an hour. A more likely option that some pointed out in the comments is that it was simply a delivery driver, but OP says in an update that both times no delivery bags were on the person or in the vehicle. So with option 2 out of the window, let's entertain the disturbing options. It's highly likely that these guys were looking to rob the place. No cars in the driveway, possible that they thought the house was empty, but OP says that they kept the lights dim, so there was definitely reason to believe that people were home from an outsider's perspective. It would be extremely risky for a criminal to rob the place with another person inside. The robbery option has a bit of weight, as OP mentions that their mother regularly posts on social media, and she mentioned that she's on holiday, making it very clear that she isn't home. We should note, however, that someone seeing this over social media and planning to rob the place is very unlikely, as OP says that not a lot of people know their address unless they are close. The most likely possibility here is that criminals saw the place and thought about robbing it if OP wasn't home, but it could be something much more sinister, or the truth could be more lighthearted, as some users pointed out. Someone said that a catfish could be leading the men to OP's address, while others theorized that the men were mistaking OP's address with that of a sex worker, which would explain the low profile, late night appearances. The last two don't really explain why they would sit outside OP's house for up to 30 minutes, and really the most plausible way to explain this is that the house was being cased, but I guess we'll never know the truth. Since the incidents, OP has installed a ring camera and a floodlight to catch them in the act if it ever happens again. OP's neighbours also noticed the guy and are aware of the situation. Since the updates, OP has gone IA for 6 months, with only one update in the form of a reply to a comment asking if they are okay. They replied, "Hi, yes, I am okay. Since we installed the camera, we have not had any suspicious activity since, so the best outcome, but also the least interesting." Let's just hope that they continue to stay safe, and that it was simply a case of mistaken address. An additional update, since this is an updated narration, that this video was recorded in 2022, however I can confirm that OP has not made a single post since. I'm worried that I'm being stalked, although I'm not sure if I'm being paranoid or if the suspect's behaviour is genuinely concerning. I live in a condo in a small neighbourhood with one circular road that's maybe a quarter of a mile in circumference at most. There's this car that is driven by multiple times. This only happens at night. They'll usually speed past the house if I'm not visible through the window, but will slow to a crawl if I am, for example if I'm watching Netflix. It still happens if I draw the blinds, since the side lights, long window next to the main door, aren't covered. The person has come to a dead stop before, twice, then opened the car door and leaned out, then closed it, all while staring into my window. This has happened 4 or 5 nights now, all when I was downstairs. Half the time I'm upstairs. The car will pass by my condo an average of 3 to 5 times each night, usually within the same hour or two, and I would like to once again stress how small my neighbourhood and its road is. Today, my significant other and I attempted to set up a scenario to make it seem like I was alone in an attempt to take a picture of the vehicle. A different car than usual came by and stopped outside my house, but when my SO appeared in the window, the car immediately backed up. It's a one-way road. Then sped past the house behind another car. I'm not sure if it's different people, the same person with different cars, or something entirely different. This only happens at night, and the main vehicle is a dark colour. The one that backed up today was white or silver, but we most likely haven't seen it after it reversed and sped off. All we know is that the suspect is most likely a white male. We suspect that he is under 50. He also has short hair. Is there anything I should do? I don't have enough info to go to the police. I'm 18, so I can legally purchase a firearm for self-defense if need be, as well as other things. Stun guns are illegal where I live, but I do have pepper spray and many knives in the kitchen if there's a break-in. Any advice is appreciated. Small neighbourhood, one circular road, and a possible stalker. Let's discuss. It really does sound as if OP is being stalked. I mean, look at the evidence supporting that. A car with an unknown man pulling up or slowing down outside their house if they're visible, stares into the window at them while exiting the car. I for one would be very disturbed if I was the victim. As always, we have to look at the different possibilities, and Redditors came up with some interesting, out there but plausible theories. The one that got the most attention was a user telling OP to check for Pokestops in the neighbourhood. If you don't know, Pokestops are areas around communities in the popular game Pokemon Go that when you find them will provide you with items. They're usually in hotspots and areas of interest, so it's certainly a possibility. However, OP did a check and reported back saying that there are none in the neighbourhood, and the nearest one is 0.25 miles away. But let's not give up hope of this being innocent. Another user asks if OP's address is easy to find on map apps, as it could be a delivery driver looking for an address and they just happen to stop outside OP's house every time. This one's probably less likely, as it seems to happen quite a bit, and OP says that they circle around more than twice per night. The final popular theory by one Redditor was that it's possible the driver works nearby and he just drives around on his break. They also suggest that it could be a delivery driver waiting for an order, or finally, it could be the driver's route to smoke weed. These are also very good suggestions, but it doesn't explain away the staring at OP, leaning out of the vehicle, stopping in front of the house, and driving away quickly when OP's SO was home. Once again, this could be a case of a criminal scoping out the place for a robbery. They'd probably want to be less suspicious, however, and them staring at OP certainly makes it obvious that they're there, almost as if they want to be seen. OP gives a brief description of the man too. White male, under 50, short hair. The second car showing up and doing the same thing is also very weird. Like OP said, it's possible it's the same person with a different car, or it could be a completely different person doing the exact same thing. I don't know which one is scarier, to be honest. OP says in an update that they set up cameras, with the one issue being that they were very visible. They believe the man saw them as he stopped showing up, or at least he stopped his weird activities. OP continues to post to this day, and they seem to be safe. We can only hope that the man really was gone for good. Now in 2025 I do have a bit of an update. In a comment posted on 2024, someone suggested gang stalking. And OP replied saying that since posting this post they had moved away from the area, and you'll be happy to know that they are still posting to this day, with their most recent post being just a day ago. When I was around 13 years old, a person added me on MSN. Their name was Jay, and they were from Birmingham, England. We talked a lot and became fast friends. They'd send me birthday cards and we'd talk every day. When I was at school, we'd talk via Hotmail, as I had no access to MSN. Jay does exist because I met them in person once. They introduced me to their friend Dan, who was 15 at the time. Our only interaction was via MSN. I didn't have a webcam or a cell phone, so I never spoke to him in person. Dan and I became closer than Jay and I were. We dated online for a little while when things took a turn. According to Dan, he'd gotten a girl pregnant and she died in childbirth. He sent me pictures of the baby. A week after that, on Valentine's Day 2007, Jay messaged me to tell me that Dan had hung himself. I was 14 at the time and distraught. However, over the years, I've begun doubting whether Dan was actually Jay, or even someone else. I was bullied relentlessly in high school by this one girl who would talk to Dan and Jay. Because it's been so long, I can't remember how she got Jay/Dan's email addresses. After Dan died, I ended up getting into a conversation with this bully about it. She claims she met him in person, but the caveat to that was to tell me all the horrible things that he had supposedly said about me, so I didn't know whether she actually met him or was just saying so to hurt me. I need some closure, and I don't know where to start. I've searched Jay's full name and city online before, but have come up with nothing. They did send me a memorial video that was made by them and Dan's friends where they talked about him, which I may be able to find. This story is very full on, so let's break it down and dissect it. There are three main people here: Jay, Dan, and a bully. Jay and the bully both exist as OP has met them in real life, but it's up in the air whether Dan ever did, and that's the question that OP is asking. According to Jay, Dan took his own life in 2007, and OP has their theories that Dan was actually Jay, or just a catfish in general. So the main point to take from this is the question of, does Dan really exist? The bully claims to have met him, but can we take their word for it? OP's update on the situation reads as follows. So it's been a whirlwind of a week. I'm still processing, honestly. I managed to finally log into the email account I used to talk to Jay and Dan on. I sifted through tons of emails trying to find a picture or any information that I could use. I managed to find a picture of them, which another user tried to cross-reference with pictures of people with the same name in their general area, but came up empty-handed. In one of their emails, they mentioned a teacher by name, and another, the name of a girl in their class. I searched for the girl on Facebook and found the high school they attended, which I cross-referenced on Google with the teacher's name, and it was a match. Now, we had the exact town that they lived in. An extremely helpful user took this information and managed to find an old address for Jay, which listed their parents' and siblings' full names as well. I managed to find their brother on Facebook, who was so nice and helpful. Plot twist, Jay is now John, and that's why I couldn't find them anywhere online. John's brother advised me that John didn't have social media, but he remembered me from all that time ago. I asked him if he knew or remembered Dan at all, and he said that he did. I asked if he'd actually met him before, and he said he had a bunch of times. Then I asked the big question. I know he existed now, but when did he die? He didn't. John's brother linked me to his Facebook account under a slightly different name. His face is still exactly the same, just 10 years older. Dan is still very much alive. He never died. He never killed himself. I spent my teens mourning this boy, and it was all just an evil, sick lie. John's brother was super kind about it all, and explained that John had a habit of just doing and saying shit to hurt people because he felt like it. I couldn't convey to him that it wasn't just John who did this, it was Dan too. I just felt too embarrassed to try and explain that to him. Dan and I talked every single day for 2 years. We shared everything with each other. Then one day, he just decides he doesn't want to do this anymore, so he pretends to have killed himself. What trips me the f*** out was that John sent a pamphlet for a memorial on the beach in my hometown. I begged my mum to let me go, and she wouldn't. What would have happened if I'd have gone? John sent me a video of various different people talking about how missed Dan was, and what a wonderful person he was, and how he was gone too soon. How many people were involved in this? I think my bully did meet up with Dan, and I think perhaps he did tell her he hated me, and I still think she thinks he's dead too. It's been a decade, and she's still an awful person, so I really don't think she'll have been able to keep this to herself for this long. It was so bizarre and so heartbreaking scrolling through his Facebook post and seeing his whole life that he'd lived, while I've been mourning him this whole time. It seems he lives a very nice life. So this is a crazy conclusion. Dan was in fact real, and he is alive. It's crazy to think that John lied about his death and obviously got a lot of people that agreed to join him. To go to the lengths that John did with making a fake memorial pamphlet and video, it begs a question of how much planning went into all of this, and what compelled him to do this in the first place. This was an extremely insensitive and hurtful act that was committed by both John and Dan. The fact they kept it up and basically just forgot all about OP is extremely hurtful to read about, so I can't even imagine how OP must have felt. Some commenters pointed out that John possibly told Dan a terrible lie about OP, and that's why he stopped talking to them and went along with his plan. Others theorized that maybe Dan wasn't in it, and John was catfishing OP and needed an escape. Whatever happened, a lot of people involved in the situation did a disgusting thing, and I'm just glad that OP got the closure that they needed, even if it wasn't the answer that they thought it would be. And although we don't have a specific update on OP in this case, they are still posting to Reddit, so all the best to them. I hope that everything's okay. Our first case today is one where a brother returns home from a trip to another country. However, things are strange, and the family believe that he may not be the same man who left at all. I, M30, want to preface by saying I'm not mentally ill, and this is not the schizo post that you're expecting. I have no better way to articulate what I'm thinking right now. My brother, M20, just came back from his gap year, travelling Asia in hopes that he'd find himself. We were never really close, so his lack of contact during this year didn't strike me with too much alarm. But my parents have informed me of 3 separate incidents in which they needed to contact authorities to ask about him. He's a mummy's boy, so this did seem very out of character. We hosted a dinner for my brother's return to the country, but upon seeing him at the airport, it was like a stranger tried to draw my brother from memory and pass that as a real thing. He looked completely different. He was severely underweight, he looked 2 to 3 inches shorter, he seemed bedraggled and unkempt. Believe me, this was the opposite of my brother prior to his trip. He had always been a germaphobe, someone who washes his hands twice to make sure that he eliminates all the bacteria, but this guy, he smelled horrendous. He didn't even talk to us, or properly acknowledge our existence. He begrudgingly gave our mum a hug and our dad a handshake, but he did not say hello to me. It's been around 2 weeks, and what I've been hearing from my parents is horrifying. Apparently, he's been extremely active at night and sleeping during the day. They can only get faint murmurs out of him, and his speech is becoming increasingly nonsensical. He doesn't shower, he doesn't seem to eat, he spends all his days locked away in his room, doing something, my parents don't know what, extremely loudly. They've already contacted a doctor, and he's on a waiting list to see a therapist. I suggested getting the police involved, but they were determined not to. My mum is afraid, and I don't know what to do. I volunteered to stay over and be the peacekeeper as our parents are getting old, and I'm personally worried about that psycho doing something to them. However, my parents have too rejected this. I was never too close with my brother, but this isn't him at all. Does anyone know what could have caused this, or what we can do? It's like someone kidnapped my brother and replaced him with the dude from Castaway. Pretty creepy, right? Imagine one of your family members went on a simple holiday, and when they came back, you almost couldn't recognize them. I'm sure it would throw us all off, so OP's concerned post is certainly not surprising. People immediately took to the comments, and the theory that dominated the conversation was that the brother was having some sort of mental health crisis. One commenter pointed out that, being 20, the brother was at the age where schizophrenia was likely to show up, and so this being an episode of that would be very likely considering the circumstances. And this theory would tie in perfectly to a similar one, that the sudden onset could have been caused by extreme drug use. Through some simple searches, you can discover that drugs such as methamphetamine are incredibly easy to access in Southeast Asia. Not only that, they're cheap too. Considering he had been away for a year, he would have had plenty of time to use a lot of them, maybe even becoming an addiction, and it would have been more than enough time for his appearance to change as a result. This would also likely cause the personality shift that we know happened. OP's title of the post, that his brother has been replaced, while it may not be true, it's not hard to see why he would think that. The man who returned was a shadow of the person who he had known for all of his life, and with the behavioural shift mixed with the physical differences, it's no surprise that he jumped to the very out there conclusions. However, you could argue that, no matter the outcome, his brother has been replaced in a sense. This is a person who he does not recognise, even if physically it is the same human being, and sadly, this post has a horrific conclusion. Update. Hey all, I thought I'd share an update. This will also be my last post on this site, and I wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone who commented. To those who provided genuine help and support, I couldn't be more thankful. My brother is dead. We found him in the early hours of the morning, and I've spent the rest of the day finding the courage to make this post. Maybe it's shock, but I'd like to think he died over in Vietnam, and upon his return, his body was simply catching up, rather than prolong his torment. You all do a wonderful service here, so please keep doing what you're doing. Like the brother says in that post, it's likely that the man who he knew did die in Vietnam. I can't even imagine how difficult it is to witness your loved one losing their mind, especially when, to you, it's like they were there 1 minute and gone the next, and when you know that there is little you could have done to help. OP has since deleted their account. What if one day you woke up and your friend has sadly taken their own life? Some of you may have sadly went through that, and that was the case for this Redditor, but they suspect that something is up. My friend was found dead by her husband in June of 2023. Without giving too much away, here are the facts. No note was left. It's a year and a half later, and there is still no police report published. The investigating officer said he only has scattered notes and doesn't know when it will be done. She was found shot in the head on the side of her non-dominant hand in the backyard. The house is in the middle of nowhere. Not one person, even her, was swabbed for gunpowder. No one was brought in for any sort of questioning. It was just ruled a suicide immediately. She had been having an affair. We don't know exactly when her husband found out. Husband is a skilled and experienced hunter. Husband's alibi has changed several times. Police say that he is cleared because his cell phone pinged on the other side of Chicago, which is 6 hours away. She had been talking to people normal for that entire day, and had even gone to the grocery store to get food for the 4th of July weekend. A friend had called her, and she was chopping veggies as they talked. There were chopped veggies found in the house too. Husband first told her friends that he was at his parents' house when it happened. It later changed to he was on a work trip. A private investigator was hired, and that very much upset the husband because he's a private guy. The PI says he can't do anything until he has an official police report. One friend who began asking questions found a deer skull on her porch in the middle of the night, and all her chickens were dead, with no clear trauma, but all lined up in a row. Cops said he didn't swab husband's hand because it was all bloody, and he was extremely distraught. Texts were sent from her phone that night that were very uncharacteristic of her, cancelling plans for the next day. Did not appear to be written by her. Husband says that the Glock 20 was still in her left hand, pointed at her head when he found her. This contradicts the story he told the police that the gun was in her lap, and what he told her mother, that she was laying there and he had to pick her head up and turn it to see what she had done. This is honestly just scratching the surface of what we have, but is this not odd? Can anyone please advise? We are desperate. It's been over a year and a half with not even a police report. We do have an entire file made up if anyone's interested, including recordings with the police, husband, the 911 call, the autopsy, etc. This one screams suspicious. First of all, the police immediately ruling this as a suicide without taking anyone in for questioning is extremely concerning, and is an immediate failure to carry out proper justice. It's only right to do a proper investigation, and it's clear that they did not do that here. The husband is also not painting himself in a good light. His story has already shifted multiple times, initially claiming that he was at his parents' house, to later claiming that he had been on a work trip at the time of the incident. His entire alibi also hangs on the fact that his phone pinged 6 hours away, which could have easily been faked if he had given his phone to someone else for this period of time. It is also concerning because police have taken it completely at face value, and almost written off his dodgy story as fact because of this single piece of unverifiable evidence. The text messages that friends of the dead received that night also seem weird and out of character, as OP pointed out. There have been many cases in the past where someone's husband has killed them and tried to pretend like they were still alive by sending messages from their phone. And while I'm not throwing out any accusations, I'm just pointing out that it would be a possibility. Doing some research, I also found out that it's common to conclude that if wounds were inflicted on a person with what would be their non-dominant hand, then that would raise a lot of doubt. it and essentially rule out the possibility of suicide. And if this woman had truly taken her own life, why would disturbing things start to happen to people who ask questions? Commenters urged OP to take this story to the local news, and it's hard to disagree. That would be a brilliant option because it would finally get eyes and ears on a case that police are essentially trying to write off. In a lot of other cases, OP could just be seen as someone struggling with the loss of someone that they loved, and so they don't accept it for what it is. But with all the evidence taken into account, this certainly isn't the case here. Another example of why the justice system is completely inept to do the work that we expect them to do, and OP is still left without any answers. Sometimes the most unsettling mysteries don't happen in the dark, gritty, abandoned houses, but rather in what should be your safe space. This next case involves a Redditor who lives in an apartment, and their neighbour knows far too much about them. I live in a small apartment building in Vienna, and for the most part has been pretty quiet and uneventful. But over the past few weeks, something has been happening that's made me feel like I'm being watched. It started with small things. I'd come home and find my mail slightly out of place, like someone had gone through it. Then I noticed that my trash bin in the hallway had been moved, just a few inches, but enough to make me wonder. The real turning point was last week. I ran into my neighbour, an older man who lives across the hall. We've exchanged polite nods before, but this time, he stopped me and said, "I hope you enjoyed your trip to Salzburg last weekend." I immediately froze. I had gone to Salzburg, but I hadn't told anyone in the building about it. When I asked how he knew, he just smiled and said, "Oh, I notice things." Since then, it's gotten worse. He'll make comments about what I'm wearing, what I've been cooking, even what time I usually go to bed. It's like he's keeping tabs on me, and I have no idea how he's doing it. I've started double checking my locks and keeping my curtains closed, but it doesn't feel like enough. I don't want to overreact, but I can't shake the feeling that something's not right. Has anyone dealt with a neighbour like this? What should I do? Is someone moving into their own flat soon? I would be incredibly freaked out if this were to happen to me, as I'm sure all of you would be too. There are many possibilities as to how OP's neighbour could be getting all of this information, so let's look at the most likely choices first. There is a very good chance that the neighbour is going through OP's mail. If he had gotten any letters about his trip to Salzburg, then this would at least explain how he knew all of this. He would have to have opened the letters though, which I'm sure OP would have noticed, so that brings me on to the second option, that he was looking for OP's trash. If OP had put the letter in the trash after he was finished reading it, then it would have been easy for the neighbour to snatch it, read it, and keep that information in his head. Although this would explain it, it certainly doesn't make the situation any less creepy. Because why would someone go out of their way to know everything about their neighbour's private life? It is called private for a reason. People have urged OP to invest in a shredder to possibly prevent this from happening in the future if this is what is happening, and OP said in a comment that they are making sure to be extra careful with both their mail and their trash. OP mentioned that in the past there had been a master key system, and considering how long OP's neighbour had lived there in the building, he suspected that there was a good chance that the neighbour may have access to this. He asked his landlord to change the locks to his apartment, but he has not provided an update as to whether it actually happened, and there are no other updates. We are left with a creepy situation, and an OP who is hopefully living their best life without their nosy neighbour. Have you ever experienced the death of a family member? If you have, you'll know how horrible it is, and how difficult that it can be to process such a big loss. So imagine if, one day, years later, you find out that the person who you thought was dead is actually alive. I need to find serious answers about this, because at this point, I don't know if there's something wrong with me, or if there's something wrong with my family. My great aunt Anna Julia, let's just call her Julia, died of natural causes at 90 something a couple of years ago. I remember my father getting a call while we were driving, so he put the phone on speaker, and his brother, my uncle, told him with a shaky voice, "Aunt Julia died last night." And my father was so shocked, he stopped the car while on the highway. My mum had to snap him out of it and get him to keep driving until we could stop. I also remember my mum comforting my father and him leaving that evening for the funeral, which was some days later. That night, I also called my grandma to give her my condolences. Lastly, I remember that the next day or so, my father posted a picture with Julia on Facebook as a goodbye to her, even though he barely posts anything in socials in general. Sad, but normal so far. The problem is, my father is visiting his hometown right now, and we called him this morning to ask how everything was going, and as he was telling us, he casually mentioned my great aunt Julia not liking the dinner that he'd cooked for the family last night. I cut him off, and I was like, "Julia, as in Anna Julia, your aunt?" And he replied that, yes, we were talking about the same person. There's another Julia in my family, but she's in her 40s and lives abroad, plus she's not my dad's aunt, obviously. I immediately asked, "But wasn't she dead?" And my mum promptly looked at me weird, and my father said, "What are you talking about?" I pushed it a little, but ultimately let it go for the time being. At the start, I even believed they were pranking me for some reason, but after we hung up, I had a conversation with my mum, in which I tried to remind her of us finding out Julia had passed away, the funeral, and everything, and she couldn't remember a thing. She told me I must have gotten her confused with another Julia, but we literally know nobody else with that name, save for that person I talked about before. But it doesn't end there, no. My mum and I were sitting down to have lunch when my mum got some text. She laughed and said something like, "Well, she looks pretty alive for a dead woman," as she showed me some pictures. And sure enough, there were photos of some family members my father was having lunch with, and who was in most of them? My great aunt Julia. I was fed up and honestly scared shitless at this point. I even went looking for that picture my father posted with Julia on Facebook, and apparently he hasn't posted a picture on there for 5 whole years. And I dug deep. I ended up checking the socials of other family members too, and nothing. I don't know if there's an explanation of some sort for this, but I'd really like some advice. I posted this on a different subreddit before, but it was deleted, I think. Anyway, people in the comments suggested these explanations. 1. That it was a dream I had, very original, which I truly doubt, because like I said, I remember the days after it happened. I can perfectly recall my father coming back from the funeral sometime afterwards. I remember that we were in the car originally going to IKEA to buy a desk for my mum, and we had to end up going like the week afterward or so. 2. That I switched dimensions, which is fair because I posted it on a Glitch in the Matrix subreddit at first, but now I'm seriously worried that something's wrong with my brain, so I'm going for a different approach. 3. A couple of people DM'd me accusing me of faking a story for engagement or as a writing exercise, but I don't know how to tell you all that I swear on everything I've got that this is unfortunately happening to me. What I'm doing now: trying to find some WhatsApp conversations that we had in a group chat with my parents about when my father was coming back from the funeral, etc. But I don't know if I'll be able to because I've changed phones since then and lost a lot of chat logs. Any advice is appreciated. Thank you. OP is remembering a clear, detailed memory of their great aunt passing away, but reality shows that she is actually alive. So, what happened? This could definitely be a false memory that OP's mind has come up with. Even some of our most vivid memories can be fabricated. This could be especially likely if OP had another family member who died around that time, maybe another aunt or an uncle. During a time of stress, their brain could have confused a lot of the details as the years have passed, solidifying another person's death as their great aunt in OP's head. Another possibility that many people in the comments came up with was that this was just a big misunderstanding that was corrected, but OP didn't know. Years back, there is a good chance that OP's dad was told that Julia had died, but he had misunderstood and assumed that it was OP's great aunt. It could have been someone with a different name, or maybe even the same name that their dad didn't process correctly. This would make sense if he did then go on to make the Facebook post that OP remembered, because it would probably be then that he would be corrected, remove the post, and go on with his life. Out of embarrassment or just wanting to move on, he may have completely forgotten that OP knew, or assumed that someone else had corrected OP. As others pointed out, this seems much more likely than the complete fabrication of a vivid memory. The very out there conclusion is that this was some sort of glitch in the Matrix. If you believe in that stuff, there could be a chance that there is a reality out there where OP's great aunt did die, and OP managed to get back to this one where they are alive and well. The death could have also been a dream. This would explain why OP's mum just laughed it off. Surely if there was a misunderstanding in the past, she would have known and maybe explained what happened to OP. But if it all happened inside their head, then of course the mum would have no way of knowing this. If OP is truly looking to solve what happened, then they should try and conclude if it is likely to be a dream. Ask their mum what other funerals the family may have attended around that time. Ask if anyone else, even outside of the immediate family, had passed away in that period. With those answers, maybe they can then find some closure. But there's only one thing that we can be sure of right now, and that is that Great Aunt Julia is alive. Angry, confused, and scared, this OP came to the RBI subreddit with a terrifying story. They had tried to call their long-distance boyfriend multiple times, but every time, someone else had picked up, and things were making absolutely zero sense. My boyfriend is in Myanmar. I'm in North America. Recently, we've become long distance, but we lived together prior to this. When he went to Myanmar, he gave me his new phone number. I've called him on the number before, he's answered multiple times, so I know for a fact that it is his number. Recently, we got in a little argument, and he's barely messaged me. He hasn't had his internet switched on at all, so I decided to call his phone number because I knew that that would be on. So I called it once, then a woman answered the phone. At first, I was angry because a woman was answering his phone, but then I realised that her accent wasn't even Burmese. Confused, I hung up, double-checked the number, and called again. This time, a man picked up. He was rambling on very quickly in a thick Russian accent. I couldn't understand anything he was saying. I hung up and quickly called back, now under the impression my boyfriend must have been kidnapped or something by a bunch of Russians. When I called back again, a kid picked up. He was screaming into the phone, and after a few times saying hello, he started having a regular conversation in Burmese. It was one-sided, like I couldn't hear who he was talking to, even if he was talking to anyone. I couldn't make out many words because I'm not fluent, but I could hear him saying mother, work, don't have. He would pause before continuing on. This time, I hung up and called immediately back. Now an Indian woman speaking English picked up. This is where I could confirm completely that I was hearing other people's conversations over the phone lines. I can't remember exactly what she was saying, but I could tell it was a scam call. She was requesting details from someone, then she would pause and say things like yeah, or that's right, or I just need your details. I started trying to speak into the microphone, but I went unheard. She just continued on this conversation with someone. I couldn't hear anyone except for her. This is 100% my boyfriend's phone number, and now I'm not sure how I'm supposed to contact him. Every time I try, someone else picks up the phone, someone who can't hear me. Honestly, it's really weird to me that I'm hearing conversations from other people when I'm just trying to call my boyfriend. It makes me feel extremely creepy, and I don't understand why it's happening. Is there any explanation for this? Certainly a creepy incident, but is there a simple answer? Possibly, because according to an article written in 2021, sources told the press that the Myanmar military was ordering the country's telecom and internet service providers to install intercept spyware that would allow the army to eavesdrop on unsuspecting citizens. This would include their phone calls. And the person making the call would be unable to hear the eavesdropping military person on the other end, exactly as OP is experiencing here. A few people suggested a simpler option, that the call was being forwarded by her boyfriend, but he proved that this was not the case. By the sounds of it, he isn't very tech savvy, as OP had to even explain how to screen record and use Google, but once he figured it out, he showed that not only did he have no call forwarding settings enabled, but OP's number wasn't even blocked, so there was no reason why she shouldn't have been able to get through to him. OP also provided this update to the story. Shortly after I posted this, my boyfriend turned on his internet. We talked for a bit and I explained to him what was going on. He insisted that no one has been on his phone. He said it was possible that his friends had picked it up at some point if he wasn't available, because they do live in the same house, but his friends only speak Burmese and don't have children. So that doesn't explain the Russian, English, or the child. Someone suggested that I get my boyfriend to screen record as I called to prove that he wasn't pulling a prank or doing anything weird. After 30 minutes of explaining how to even screen record to him, he figured it out. He showed me proof that his phone number was the one I had been calling, then showed me his blocked callers list. During this screen recording, I called him. His phone didn't ring. Instead, a Burmese woman answered the phone. She was just rambling on about her day. She was either driving or standing by a very busy road as I could hear heavy traffic, almost completely drowning out her voice. His small village doesn't even have cars. Everyone gets around by using small boats. I also posted in the Myanmar subreddit, and someone made a good point. Although they didn't have an explanation, they were right about the current state of the country. Due to the war, the country's phone lines and internet are heavily controlled, and it's possible that that is what is causing this. And as it would turn out, that would most likely be the correct answer, because after hearing some stories from the Myanmar subreddit, they came to the conclusion that this was due to the eavesdropping ability that the military had. How OP managed to get access to that accidentally, we don't know, but with everything taken into account and the restrictions in place over there, it's hard to argue that this isn't the case, especially when in comments of the post made to the Myanmar subreddit, people have said that they had experienced similar things in the past. As for why it's happening to OP though, they suggested that it may be something to do with the fact that this is an international call, as all of his friends are able to call him with no problem at all. Genuinely concerned right now for OP though, as they seem to have just turned 20 and their boyfriend is 28 years old. Their post history also shows that they dated a 31-year-old in the past, but hey, who am I to judge, I suppose? Just a little note, and OP, if you're watching this video, just be careful, please. But for now, we have our answer as to why OP was able to listen in on other people's calls. Earlier this year, a Redditor would make a post recalling an incident that happened to them all the way back in 1992. When you read it, you realise just how creepy the details are. And now, OP believes that they may have almost been the victim of a sick cult. In 1992, I worked in a witchcraft / rental store in Manhattan. It was December 20th, and there had just been this massive blizzard, so the city was covered in snow still. My usual shift was 4 PM to 12 AM with my boss, but because he fell and broke his hip, it was just me. At the start of my shift, some religious guy came in and tried to make a scene. I was annoyed enough at this point, so I kicked him out. The normal crowd of odd men came in, but one in particular I kept noticing. Later, some middle-aged white man kept walking past the store window and looking in. I assumed he was some yuppie who was considering buying one of our unique films that we carried. It was 11:50ish and the store was empty when he finally came in. I was about to start the closing process when he did come in. I had 10 minutes till I closed the store, but I assumed that he was just going to be quick. Once it hit 12:03, he was still wandering about the place. I asked if he was going to buy something. He then called me a degenerate, then threw a rack of VHS tapes on the floor and ran out of the store. At around 12:10, I grabbed my coat and headed for the door when a brick was thrown through the window. I looked outside and there's no one there, so I call my boss and he says that I am not allowed to leave until a repairman shows up. It was like 12 AM in the morning in Manhattan. So when I went back out, I saw there was 3 men standing outside, so I panic and run to the break room. I locked the door and they tried to kick it down. There was an alleyway which I managed to get out of. I managed to find a cop after a bit. They didn't take me seriously, but after about 10 minutes of begging, they came with me. The store they found ransacked is covered in hyper-religious graffiti. Nothing was stolen, and there was only damage to the photos and the tarot books we had. I have no idea who these guys were, and neither did the cops. The cops told me that he was either a rapist who was attacking retail workers that realized I was transsexual. There was nothing taken, so they couldn't write it off as a burglary. Nothing ever came of this from the cops. I recently tried to get my file, and the cops at the time wrote me off as a mentally ill homosexual. Does anyone know what this could have been? As some users pointed out, cults are often more organised than their sick actions. This led people to believe that OP was, rather, almost a victim of religious attackers. This makes even more sense when OP elaborates on what made the films unique. They mention that they mostly stalked adult videos featuring gay people, trans people, or BDSM content. As a lot of people still do to this day, these could have been people who believed that this stuff was against the Bible, and so decided to try and attack OP and the store when they least expected it. OP does think though that with some of the individuals who caught her eye throughout the shift, these people may have actually been stalking her all night. As for the religious graffiti that OP says they saw, they mention that they didn't get a lot of time to look at it before the police dragged them out. OP also notes that even the officers seemed freaked out by it. As for what it was, they can't remember exactly, but describe it as either satanic or really weird Catholic stuff. OP has access to her file though, and she hasn't provided any descriptions that the police wrote down about the attack. All she reveals is that the police brushed her off as a mentally ill crossdresser, showing how they treated this serious issue with very little urgency. Rather than radical religious people attacking the store specifically for the adult content that they stocked, I am actually inclined to agree with the police that the reason they attacked OP was that one of them realised that she was trans. This would have made her a much bigger target, and an even bigger one at that when we put the context of the store on top of everything. But those are just assumptions, and sadly we'll never truly know why OP was attacked on that cold winter night. Imagine how shocked you would be if you found out about a cult that had existed for years, which the government seemed to ignore. This is what happened to one Redditor. I was talking about cults or something like that this morning, and then my grandmother tells me about a Quebec cult that is still active, which is kind of a sectarian school which is illegal in Canada. This school says, for example, that planets do not exist, that the Earth is pear-shaped, and that the moon is part of the Earth's reflection, or something like that. And basically, what made me react is that this sect is known for forcing 14-year-old girls to marry adults, and I waited to say that a 17-year-old girl has about 17 children as a result of etc. And what upsets me the most is that this cult has existed since 1913, according to the cult's official website, and it has never been shut down or even faced legal charges that led to the closure of this school. And the cult is called Mission de l'Esprit Saint, which translates to Mission of the Holy Spirit. Basically, the cult's mentality is that women should only have children and stay at home, and unfortunately, they never finished their studies among women. What's more, this sect was founded by a former Montreal police officer, Eugene Richer. And I would really like that to change, because they are still standing in 2025. Please note that I know there is an investigation underway, but I don't believe them, because this has happened several times before, and they always end up being released. Very disturbing. So let's dive more into the history of this cult. Founded in 1913 by a man called Eugene Richer, Mission of the Holy Spirit is located mainly in Quebec, but has branches all around the world. The ones that are still slightly active are in California and North Carolina, and they span across many different cities. Richer's followers believe that he was the embodiment of the Holy Spirit. The teachings say that you can improve the human soul throughout your life by raising children who are better than yourself. It is this belief that often leads to disturbing situations, such as the one highlighted by OP, in which a 17-year-old girl married a 42-year-old man and had over 10 children with him. The reason we know so much about this particular incident is because the girl in question actually fled the cult with 3 of her children. She went to the press to explain how it was organised and to tell us more about the teachings. For girls in the cult, they are taught that their only purpose in life is to give birth. This means that they rarely get any sort of education past the first year of high school. The boys, however, are usually given permission to study technical subjects in the public school system around the age of 15. As we started to learn more information over the years, the authorities did start to show an interest, but because they were so scattered around the globe, there wasn't much that could be done. Instead, they decided that they wanted to start tackling them on a local level, and that began with shutting down a branch in 2019. In the Canadian city of Joliet, 200 followers of the cult had registered as a social club and were illegally gathering. They were inspected by the city and they immediately confessed that it was actually a religious thing. They were told to leave and ended up moving their meetings to another city. But their controversies don't end there, because they are also incredibly against the idea of vaccination. In fact, in the 2010s, they paid a group visit to Disneyland and they actually brought measles back to Quebec. Over 100 cases among the general public was reported, and it was an outbreak that also overtook their closed spaces. But disturbingly, people who had left the cult said that this certainly wouldn't get them to change their views, but rather, it would make them believe that they were stronger than ever. Like some commenters pointed out, the best thing to do to stop a cult is to shine as much light on it as possible. But sadly, it seems as though the media coverage of this cult has dried up. We need to make sure that people know about this cult, because if its existence ever gets forgotten, then they will be able to fly under the radar completely unchecked. What would you do if you spotted an abandoned car on the side of the road? You may be a little creeped out, but the situation got much more concerning for this Redditor. First time posting in this sub, but I wanted to share something that my friend and I have been feeling uneasy about. We were on the way to a park in Nevada, an hour out from Vegas, and noticed an abandoned Kia parked on the side of the road with its windows down. We pulled over and wanted to check it out, since all the windows were open. The highway patrol had already got into the car and wrote NHP and the date that the car was abandoned, which I believe was July 20th something 24. As we were walking around the car, we noticed a pair of mismatched women's socks on the gravel, one with what looks like a small blotch of blood on it, but it could have been a faded logo, a smudge of pigmented red sand. Normally, a pair of socks on the side of the road wouldn't be too weird, but there were also 2 cut up zip ties on top of the socks. We didn't touch the car, but peered briefly inside and saw a small decorative high heel, a hotel parking receipt, a few beverage cups, and water bottles. We just felt super uneasy and disturbed seeing the socks and zip ties, but I assume the highway patrol officer who tagged the car would have noticed those items too. Is there anything I should do? I have photos and an approximate location of where the car is, but not sure if this would be helpful to the authorities, or if those items are even worth reporting. The car is parked on a road where I think hundreds of cars would pass each day, so definitely not a remote location. Thanks for reading. A very disturbing tale, so let's investigate. We've got an abandoned car, possible blood, women's socks, and 2 cut-up zip ties. If we really take all of this evidence into account, this points towards a dark conclusion. There are at least 20 people in Arizona who went missing and were last seen in a Kia. Of course, narrowing down the search to the exact model would be much more helpful, but it doesn't seem as though that's something that is available to the public. With the plates taken off the car, we also can't know who the vehicle is registered to, even though that could prove to be a crucial piece of information. And as it turns out, this being something sinister may not be completely out there, as people who work as park rangers or near interstates have shared their disturbing experiences. One commenter said, "A park ranger out here found a car with its door open and lights on and still running in the middle of the road, and he waited an hour or two to see if anyone would return to it, and no one ever did. He was telling my boss about it happening, and I somewhat eavesdropped on the conversation, as I'm in a booth connected to the room they were having the conversation in. When I asked the park ranger if they ever found the owner to the car that was looking like it was abandoned with the lights on and door open, he said to me, 'I don't know what you're talking about.' But you could see on his face, he did, in fact, know, but was surprised I was mentioning it." Something that really stands out to me about OP's situation is that if the car was marked as abandoned in July 2024, why were the socks and zip ties not collected? If there was possible blood nearby as well, could this indicate that this car is completely separate from the current situation with the evidence, which happened in October of the same year? To me, and I'm sure many of you would agree, the only correct thing to do here is report it to Highway Patrol again. If they failed to collect the possible evidence, then that is disturbing in and of itself. But if that evidence has appeared in the months since they marked the vehicle abandoned, then that takes everything to a whole new level. Thankfully, OP made the correct decision and called them up. They told OP that they would be sending an officer to check it out, but they haven't provided any updates since. I've reached out for comment, and if I hear back, I will include that information in the pinned comment of this video. But for now, all we have is a disturbing incident and lots of potential evidence. Personally, I love when I receive mail, but I'm sure none of us would enjoy a confusing letter with no return address or sender details being posted through your letterbox. I got this postcard in the mail, and I'm unable to identify a sender. I've checked with all close friends and confirmed it's not a prank. Do any of these phrases jump out to anyone? I don't know anyone by the first name at the bottom, but they knew my full name, address, and for what it's worth, blue jays are my favourite bird and have sentimental meaning to me. Based on handwriting, it points towards a woman, but I am a straight female, so to me it reads like a man. It's postmarked in Amsterdam, but the image on the front is from the Queen's bedroom in the Royal Yacht Britannia in Edinburgh. Notably, I was in Edinburgh in August, but all lodging was booked under my husband's name, and I didn't engage in much conversation with strangers there, let alone give anyone my full name or address. Here is a text transcript. Dearest my name, I was sure for a moment I saw your blue jay at the window today. After all, they aren't native here. Does that mean you're following me? Or am I only hoping you are? This long trip away has proved to me how much you mean to me. Once I've completed this mission, I'll return and hope to pledge myself to you. Until then, every stone I collect will be dedicated to you. That thought will keep me going for the remaining 3 infiltration scenarios. They have no idea a shapeshifter is among them. Claudius. Certainly concerning, and commenters brought a lot of interesting theories to the discussion. Someone brought up that they are Dutch and they know that the postal service does not issue a lot of different stamps, but this letter was shipped from the Netherlands and they don't recognise it. They post a lot of mail internationally, and even to them, this particular stamp stood out, and they believe that it is actually custom made. Additionally, they mentioned that if it were sent internationally, it would likely state that it is intended to be sent to the USA, but on the letter, it is addressed to the US, a term that an American would be more likely to use. This led people to believe that the person was likely located in America, even though the letter had gone through the Dutch postal system. Another commenter came up with a brilliant theory, that this is a custom letter sent by someone who believed that OP likes the game Warhammer. There are multiple references to the game Warhammer 40k, including the name Claudius. There are many shops on Etsy and similar sites that will write you a letter in character from any fictional world, so potentially someone could have believed OP was a fan and got this sent to them. This would explain a lot, including the US writing, because if it were sent from a seller in the Netherlands, they would still use the delivery address stated by the buyer, which would likely state the country as the US. Of course, we also have to think about the possibility that this could have been sent by someone who took a notice to OP during their trip to Edinburgh. One person asked if anyone who worked at the hotel took particular notice of OP, as they would have had access to her address, albeit not her name, on their records. But she says that no one in particular seemed out of the ordinary. Time has passed now, and the latest update that OP provided was that they had attempted to submit a police report to keep it on record. They said that the police didn't really take it seriously, telling them that there wasn't enough information to go through with the report. One officer even said that it sounded romantic, which is an incredibly disturbing reaction for a law enforcement worker to have, especially when OP is clearly freaked out by the incident. This is where the story ends. And OP said in that same update that nothing strange has happened since. This seems to just be a one-off occurrence, but it certainly doesn't make the whole situation any less disturbing. One Redditor came to RBI with a desperate question. Had their friends' explicit images been posted somewhere without their knowledge or consent? So over the last few days, my friend has been followed by over 100 plus men on Instagram. At first, she just thought it was weird bots, but as more and more people started following her, she started getting the creeps. And she asked them where they found her, and she keeps getting the same response. The conversation goes, "Hey, I just wanted to ask where you found my Instagram handle. I've had a lot of new followers recently, and I'm just wondering where I've been posted." To which the common response is, "Hey, yeah, I can't remember where I found you, lol, I just thought you were cute." One guy said, "Were you at a concert recently?" So vague. Another said, "Somewhere on Twitter, I'll find it for you," and never replied. I feel like the guys are being intentionally vague because whatever is posted of her is sus. Nobody has any nude photos of her that she knows of, and all her social media pages are private. Could someone have made deepfake content of her and posted it somewhere? Could someone who follows her have posted pics from her social media in some group? The followers have been easing off over the last day, down from 2 per hour to 1 every 3 hours, so it seems like it could be on a thread that's getting new posts, and the post of her is getting older. Is there any way to find out where/what is posted of her? She's just a bit worried there's fake content out there of her. With how the internet is nowadays, there is a disturbingly real possibility that OP's friends' pictures have been posted on some sort of group. In a lot of these instances, the pictures don't even need to be explicit. More and more examples are popping up and being reported in the mainstream media of women's photos being posted in private communities or forums. A lot of the time, they will be accompanied by their phone number or a link to their social media. And it's not only OP's friend who has experienced this, as one commenter shares that they have had a similar experience. I had loads and loads of random men start WhatsApping me. I asked them all where they found my number, and finally, after weeks, one of them sent me a link to a Telegram group called English Queens. And it's just guys posting girls' pictures and zoomed in pictures of their feet, etc. with their phone numbers. This was about 2 years ago, and still to this day, I get texts occasionally. They were also putting girls' Instagram links in there, so what I'm trying to say is that it might be one of those things. I have no idea how they got my details, but these groups are very prevalent, which could explain your friend's situation. To some of you, this may seem like an out there conclusion, but for regular viewers of the channel, you will know that it really isn't. There are dark corners of the internet where hundreds of thousands of sick individuals will get their kicks from sharing random women's information, a lot of the time with these girls being underage. Thankfully, OP's friend may have the answer to their predicament, but it certainly doesn't make the situation any better. This Redditor came to the RBI subreddit to share their mother's disturbing story about the time that they were almost abducted. But disturbingly, the story continues because OP has found out that their mother's story eerily lines up with the unsolved cases of a number of missing girls. Growing up, my mum would tell me a cautionary tale about how she was almost abducted as a child. It always stuck with me, but as I got older and got into true crime, I decided to ask her for more details. Here's what she told me. She was around 12 or 13 years old, living in Jacksonville, Florida. She and a neighborhood girl were playing outside when a man approached and offered them a ride to the gas station. They accepted, but during the ride, the man drove past the gas station. They then realised that the passenger side door handles were broken off and they couldn't get out. The other girl fought back. She had a cigarette and used it to burn the man, which caused him to pull over and let them out. The police were called. Somehow, they found the man and arrested him. My mum testified in court, but the case was dismissed. She doesn't remember the exact reason, but thinks it has to do with some of the car details not matching up. Still, she's certain it was the same man who tried to abduct them. The broken door handles part really disturbed me. That seems like a calculated move, like he'd done this before or planned to again. It made me wonder if this guy was connected to any other cases, so I started googling things like the Jacksonville 1970s. Nothing useful came up, but when I searched Missing Girls Jacksonville, I found something chilling. The case of the 5 missing girls from Jacksonville around the same time period. There is a reporter named Catherine Jeffries who's done extensive reporting on those cases. I looked up the dates and locations, and my mum's attempted abduction would have happened within about a year of those disappearances. Her old house is only a few miles away from where some of those girls vanished as well. I called the Jacksonville Cold Case Unit and spoke to an officer. She just said, "Old case, so it's gonna take a while to look into," and I never heard back. I also emailed the reporter and gave her all the info I had. Then I tried to request the case records, but Jacksonville court records told me I needed the suspect's name in order to get anything, which we don't have. My mum doesn't remember it, and her family didn't keep any paperwork. To be honest, the Jacks police were really dismissive, and the records person was very rude. I ended up feeling totally deflated and just gave up. But it still nags at me. What if this guy was connected to those other cases? My mum also wants to know why her case was dismissed. We both want to know if her testimony could have helped stop someone. So here are my questions. Are records from dismissed cases in the 1970s still kept anywhere? Is there any way to request those records without the suspect's name? Are there other ways I could try to get law enforcement to re-examine her case as a possible lead related to those 5 missing girls? Is it worth filing a Freedom of Information Act request, or would that even help? Any help, advice, or ideas would be greatly appreciated. I know it's been decades, but I don't want to let this just disappear like it didn't matter. The first thing that immediately stands out about this case are the broken door handles. As OP touched on, this move seems extremely calculated, and with this taken into account, there is no doubt in my mind that this is a thing that proves the man's sinister intentions. Not only is this move premeditated, but it also indicates that this is a person who has done this before. The fact that he's taken extra steps to make sure that there was almost no escape means that this is likely not his first time attempting something like this. The fact that this case was dismissed as well. Not only has the justice system not put this man behind bars, but in doing so, they have failed his victims entirely. And that does highlight how broken the justice system can be. There's a reason why in the USA, it's estimated that less than 4% of sexual crimes in particular result in a conviction. There is no excuse for this, and there's also no excuse for the small sentences that a lot of extreme offenders get. And there's definitely no excuse for a man like this to have gotten away scot-free. Commenters asked OP to ask their mum for more details, specifically details about how he looked, what he was driving, etc. And thankfully, they obliged. At the time, their mum recalls that they were living in the San Mateo neighbourhood in North Jacksonville. They also remember that the man looked like a young Jeffrey Dahmer, with his blonde hair and all. She explains her reasoning for this description more, and says that he was more in his style, clean cut with a comb over. On the car, she remembers that it was a Gremlin, or a similar type of car with a flat back. She doesn't remember what colour it was, but does recall that one of the discrepancies in the girls' statements was whether it had stripes on it or not. OP tried to call up the court records office to get more information, but they told RBI that the person on the phone wasn't really helpful, and simply told them to phone back when they had a name. They did mention that their mother was willing to phone up and get more information about the case herself, since she was one of the people involved in it, and said that he would update if she did go ahead with that. He also mentioned that he phoned up the library in Jacksonville to see if they had any records about the case or the incident. They said that he would have to come in person and someone would help him narrow down his search. And so, he mentions that he wanted to plan a detour to the library when he was going to Jacksonville for a family event. And months after the original post, OP would provide this update. Hi RBI, I wanted to give a small update and also ask for advice. I've been trying to figure out how to locate any kind of record related to the incident with my mom, and I really want to thank everyone who offered tips and insight on my original post. I'll be coming down to Jacksonville in November for Thanksgiving, and I'm planning to arrive a few days early so that I can spend some time at the library going through archives. What I've found so far while googling the Jacksonville Library's microfilm hours, I came across a Facebook post in History Jacksonville that mentioned a large portion of the Florida Times Union has been digitized and is available through a site called Newsbank. I messaged the person who made the post and asked if that upload might include court documents, and they mentioned that there's a free trial, so I got one. The database actually seems pretty thorough, and I was able to find information about my family who lived in Jacksonville and also in Orlando. To look for my mum's case, I've been searching abduction or kidnapping in the 1971 to 1975 range. While I've been searching for my mum's case, I've been saving any articles that sound similar, especially ones involving abductions or attempted abductions involving a car. But I haven't found anything that really seems promising. I spent a few hours looking so far, and I plan to get the monthly subscription so I can keep going for a few more weeks. I'm not finding many court dockets yet, mostly newspaper articles, but I'm going to keep checking. If anyone else here has access to Newsbank, or is an FSCJ student/employee with access, and you see something similar to my mom's story, please feel free to message me what I could use advice on. One thing I'm unsure about is whether Newsbank contains all of the newspaper records from that time period, or just a large selection. Since I'll be in Jacksonville soon, I'm trying to figure out how to best use my time while I'm there. Should I go with my mom to a court records office and ask in person about her case? Or is there a chance that the library might have materials that aren't included in Newsbank? Any tips or advice would be appreciated, especially from anyone familiar with Florida's public records or older newspaper archives. Also, I've been considering posting on Facebook to try and find the other girl in the situation. I had deactivated my account for a while, but recently reactivated it. I will likely do that once I've exhausted the Newsbank database. Thanks again to everyone who commented on my first post and helped point me in the right direction. While OP has definitely found a great lead, as one commenter pointed out, the library may have many more newspapers available than Newsbank. This is definitely the case if OP can find out whether they may have archived smaller, local newspapers as well. This is still an ongoing situation, and in November, I will hopefully have an update to provide you on if OP has finally managed to track down this case. But there are many more details involved, including a case with eerily similar stories. To sum it up, in the summer of 1974, 5 young girls went missing in Jacksonville. The suspect was described as a white male with light-coloured hair in a style that was similar to Elvis Presley, and was reported to have driven many different vehicles. These included a blue bike, a white car, and a red Volkswagen Beetle. Some commenters believe that OP's mum's case may be connected to these disappearances, and for all we know, they very well could be. But for now, the story is over. But hopefully, there are many positive revelations to come in the near future. What if you were on call to your partner while you slept, and the next day you woke up to a voicemail from yourself? So I'm still pretty young and in love with my girlfriend that I don't live with, so we sleep on FaceTime almost every night. I make sure that I mute before I fall asleep. This morning particularly, I wake up having a voicemail from an ATL GA number. Being from Michigan, this is weird. I go and listen to the voicemail, and it's the audio of the very same Minecraft YouTube video that I fell asleep to. I hear the guy talking about things from the game, and I even hear it mention the YouTuber's name. I genuinely am freaking the out because I was, and am at the time of typing this, actively on the same call I was before I fell asleep. The creepiest part is that this voicemail is 3 minutes long. Someone was listening to me sleep through my phone for 3 minutes last night. I reverse phone look up the number and there was nothing to be found. The only thing in my room that could possibly pick up my audio are my phone and my Alexa. However, I changed the wake word of my Alexa so as to not accidentally activate it. If anybody has any clues or ideas, please share them with me, as this is a truly unsettling thing to have to wake up to on a workday. Very disturbing. I don't even know how I would feel if I woke up to a creepy recording of myself that I didn't take. Along with the post, OP also attached this video of the voicemail.
And after a few hours of practice, I felt more comfortable with the mace and was ready to unleash it on my steel, which the first potential use came when Mavic was challenged to 1v1 by Prince Sam.
In the comments section, they noted that apart from the call and the voicemail, nothing else seemed off. When they woke up, they were still on FaceTime with their girlfriend, the call that had started the previous night, and they mentioned that their phone was on Do Not Disturb, and they were already on an existing call, so it should have immediately declined. To make matters even more confusing, OP also mentioned that their girlfriend had muted while they were both asleep, meaning that absolutely no audio should have been picked up by OP's phone. They also went into their phone settings and found out every app that had access to their microphone: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Discord, and GarageBand. None of these apps made the call, so that essentially rules out his phone as the culprit. And with that, there is one remaining suspect. OP took a look through Alexa's activity and found out that during the night, the person in the video that he had been playing had said the words "find my phone." This triggered the Alexa and it made the phone call. Since OP was asleep, he obviously didn't answer, and even though he says he usually mutes his Alexa, he forgot to this night, and thus it left him a creepy voicemail to wake up to. So although this story ended in a positive way, take it as your reminder that all those devices around your home, they are always listening. I'm sure, like me, you've been at a gig and recorded some videos, but what if, when you look back at them, the audio was completely different? I recorded a few videos at a show last night, and when I went to watch them, they all had completely different audio from what the show actually was. It sounds like someone reporting a crime. How could that be? I can still hear the show faintly in the background, but mostly it sounds like someone's reporting a crime or talking about a crime. I took a video this morning to see if it happened again, but it did not. How could this have happened? Could I have tapped into something? Should I be worried about my phone? Commenters immediately asked OP if they had any apps running in the background while they were recording that could have caused this issue. They say that it is possible, and suggested that it could be from the Citizen app, one that allows you to get real-time safety alerts and reports from your local area. Apparently, this is quite a common thing, and a lot of people have found themselves running into a similar experience as OP. But another Redditor came with another likely conclusion. According to OP, the artists were using wireless microphones, and because it does sound like radio interruption, one commenter believes that it could be picking up signals from outside the venue. The person who came up with this theory recalls that they had experienced something similar in the past, being able to speak to truckers through their karaoke machine. But others aren't so sure, as they say it would also be coming out of the big speakers in the venue if this were the case, not just OP's phone. Believe it or not, this isn't the first time that something strange like this has been caught on video. In 1969, a man called Mel Williams had recorded a band in a local bar. Unknown to him at the time, he hadn't just recorded the band, but also the conversation between two men sitting nearby. Williams didn't listen to the tape back until the early 2000s, but what he heard was incredibly disturbing. On the tape, one of the men recorded, called Clyde Peterson, has bragged that he, Jack Golfair, and an unnamed third person were responsible for the disappearance of a woman called Evelyn Hartley, who went missing in 1953 at the age of 14. This was the first real lead in the case, but by the time this was discovered, all of the men were dead. To this day, her case remains unsolved. As for OP, this is pretty much the only conclusion that we have, that it was either the Citizen app or a radio frequency that wasn't intended for our ears. Imagine you swiped someone on a dating app, and before you know it, they're popping up everywhere. I believe I may be being stalked or fixated upon by a man. I am a 22-year-old female who first downloaded the dating app Hinge in July of 2025. I matched with a 34-year-old male and we chatted very briefly for about 3 or 4 days. Nothing suggestive or out of the norm. I decided to take a break from dating and deleted the app, disappearing mid-convo. This person happens to live in my small to medium-sized city, about 100,000 people. I work in a popular, trendy retail shop, so I see random people come in and out every day. After deleting the app though, I see said person coming into the store more often on weekends. The person never buys anything or never tries anything on, just sort of lingers about. I don't think anything of this, and in September of 2025, I re-download Hinge. Right off the bat, said person is one of my first likes, and I rematch. We begin speaking on Tuesday, and everything seems normal. My workplace and location of workplace is mentioned, unfortunately, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. On Saturday night, as I am walking out of work and home with my other two co-workers, I receive a message from said person via Hinge, telling me that he just walked past me on the street. This is odd to me because 1, we never met in person, just chatted online, and 2, the only person I did see had his head down and hands in his pockets, keeping a low profile. I begin to think something is up and this is weird, so by Sunday night, I break things off via Hinge. I delete the Hinge app, cutting off any and all communication, as I never gave this person my number or social media. He just knows my name and where I work. Skip to Monday evening, and as we were preparing to close at around 6 PM, said person comes into my workplace. The store is fairly quiet, just a couple of people looking around. I do not notice the person at first, and he lingers for about 5 to 10 minutes, not buying anything, not speaking to anyone, not trying anything on, just being there, pretending to look at pants. It is seconds before this person leaves the store that we make the most intense, terrifying eye contact. Then he leaves, and I haven't heard or seen him since. It's been a couple of days. What do you guys think? Am I being overreactive here? Is this behaviour abnormal and consistent with that of premature stalking? Right off the bat, this definitely sounds like the case of a stalker. Coming into the store since July, but not seeing him in there beforehand is a major red flag, especially considering how often he seems to visit. As one commenter points out, it's definitely wise for OP to let their co-workers know about the situation, because this is not normal, and we don't know how dangerous this man could potentially be. The last incident brought up by OP stands out as the most disturbing, because he purposefully chose to come into the store around closing time, knowing that OP would be alone and leaving the building soon. This could also indicate that he has a rough idea of OP's schedule, which is very creepy, and OP has every right to be worried. Another thing that OP should definitely do is make a police report. If something sadly were to happen, it is very good to have it all noted down on record already. That way, the police know who they are looking for and the previous circumstances. Thankfully, we have an update on the situation, and it seems as though he might have finally left OP alone. They say that after the eye contact incident, it has been 2 weeks since he last saw him. Nothing weird has happened, and they have received no attempt at contact. So hopefully, OP can now live in peace, knowing that the stalker has given up. But as they pointed out in the comments, for all we know, they could still be watching from afar. In September, one Redditor posted to RBI to get some help with their search. They were trying to find a plane that had been missing since 1978. Maybe the RBI can help me out. Only so much I can do solo here on my end. I have been investigating and chasing down every lead I can, and reviewing every document I can get my hands on. Would just love some outside opinions. December 23rd, 1978. Pilot Art Underwood takes 3 people aboard his aircraft in Indian Head, Saskatchewan. They are the Talbot family. Chet, Betty, and their son, Sheldon. Art wants to visit his parents in Vancouver, British Columbia, and the Talbots want to see their daughter, who lives at 100 Mile House, British Columbia. Art agrees to drop them off at 108 Mile House on his way to Kamloops. The Talbots will drive from 108 Mile House to 100 Mile House and spend their Christmas with their daughter and son-in-law. The trip is such a last-minute arrangement that the Christmas presents have already been mailed ahead. Bad weather makes Art rethink his route, and they decide to land in Red Deer, Alberta, around late morning or midday. They stay overnight at a local lodge, put the plane in a hangar overnight, and refuel. The next day, Art phones from the lodge twice throughout the morning, checking the weather with the local authorities. At 10:27 MST, December 24th, they take off from Red Deer Airport and are never seen again. The search lasts nearly 2 weeks. Brutal temperatures and snowfall prohibit civilian searchers from getting their planes off the ground. The plane is never found. Now let's talk about the pilot, Art Underwood. Between 31 to 35 years of age, 7,000 to 9,000 flight hours. Testimonies say that he is an excellent pilot with experience flying in the bush, Arctic, and the Canadian territories. He is qualified on various aircraft types and does a fair amount of charter work and crop spraying. Witness testimonies reveals he doesn't care to follow roadways and prefers to go direct when possible, and has a small tendency to push the weather on occasion, but is still one hell of a good pilot. His father, having flown as a pilot in World War II, reinforces this and mentions that Art was very religious about keeping within radio contact. He was considered to be extremely capable in the bush, and several people mention that if he survived the crash, he would do everything to get his passengers out alive. The passengers: Chet Talbot, 60, Betty Talbot, 47, and Sheldon Talbot, 20. Also on board is Art's dog, Brandy, a bird/hunting dog. All were dressed in warm clothing: gloves, good down jackets, footwear, etc. The plane: a Cessna 185F, manufactured in 1975, registration C-GCZH. New to Art, who had roughly only 10 hours on that particular plane, but in good shape overall as reported by mechanics. White with red trim, and allegedly an insignia of a moose on the tail. Additionally, the man who operated the hangar in Red Deer stated that the words La Pointe Air Services was painted about 1.5 inches wide on the side of it. No major maintenance concerns, but testimony reveals that the artificial horizon had been acting up, and the filter had been replaced before leaving Indian Head. On one of the last trips before the ill-fated flight, a passenger recalls Art mentioning the oil pressure starting to drop. Hangar staff theorized that his oil cooler had failed, but the equipment list had a non-congealing oil cooler installed on that particular plane. Radio equipment listed as VHF and HF. The pranks. 2 children report finding wooden boards in the Bow River in Calgary, dated December, with the following messages: "Please help. I crashed somewhere in the mountains. We are from Indian Head, Saskatchewan. Some are hurt bad. Don't know where we are." Message 2. "Help us, Indian Head. Sask. Hurt bad." Message 3. "Please help us, Indian Head. Lost. Hurt bad." The boards are found in the summer of 1979. Investigators go upriver to the Beerspaw Dam, and the superintendent informs them that due to low spring runoff, no spillage had occurred, and that there was no possibility that the boards had came from above the dam. They search the area beneath the dam and find rocks and other items with graffiti that matches the handwriting style, and are convinced it is a hoax. Also noted in the report is the following statement. The second point of interest was a report that came in from a 12-year-old boy, 14 miles west of Rimbey, who had heard calls for help on his walkie-talkie sets that he had received for Christmas. These messages were heard on Boxing Day and 2 subsequent days. The RCC said at the time that the boy was sincere, but that he might have been the victim of a hoax perpetrated by a nearby individual. This boy would go to the press in 2014 and retell his story of events. The flight path is unknown, but in taped interviews with hangar staff and other individuals, it is revealed that Art likely flew Red Deer to the Rocky Mountain House and into the mountains from there. The hangar staff corroborated this, as one individual even viewed Art's charts and maps with him, and went as far as to state, "From what I understood, the routes he was going to use was from Red Deer to the Rocky VOR and then into the Nordig Pass." The investigators agree and say as much in the official summary. Based on the weather related to him, the pilot no doubt planned to fly direct to the Rocky Mountain House VOR available, and hence attempt a direct flight to 108 Ranch. Why does this matter? Rocky Mountain House is a 45-minute drive from Rimby. From what I can gather, the man in the article lived, as a crow flies, just 35 kilometers away from the airport in Rocky Mountain House. Had Underwood taken a direct routing from YQF Airport, he would have encountered worsening weather in the Rocky Mountains, beyond VFR limits, and likely beyond his ability to get out of. There is a strong chance that he flew into a box canyon and was unable to turn out in time. In 2018, a poster on an Alberta outdoors forum claimed he discovered the wreckage in 1992 in Adams River Valley, BC, and that he escorted Transport Canada and RCMP to the site. After speaking with the Transportation Safety Board, they confirmed that they have no record of a report, and the plane remains missing as recently as this week. As the TSB was formed in 1990, they would have been the authority that investigated the crash in 1992. In summary, and through the comments that the 12-year-old made online years later in that same outdoors forum before going to the press, I believe that the plane may actually lie somewhere in the foothills of Alberta. A very interesting mystery. There was a huge search conducted for the plane at the time, with the Canadian Air Force even getting involved. The civilian search and rescue teams also clocked in around 1,100 hours of flight time looking for the aircraft. OP suspects that if it didn't fly full speed into a mountain and disintegrate, which is unlikely due to a detail that we will discuss in a second, then it is possible that it crashed in a heavily wooded area that would be hard to see from above. Even more so now that everything will be overgrown. Years later, the local 12-year-old boy, whose name is David Reynolds, claims that he actually spoke to a dying Betty in the days following the crash. He said that he had always found Christmas hard, and after a lot of discussion, it turns out that he had actually pushed that memory down, but it came back to haunt him years later. Using walkie-talkies that were given to him by his uncle for Christmas, David and his cousin had heard a voice on Christmas Eve. The voice identified herself as Betty Talbot. Keep in mind that this was before the disappearance and search effort was made public. It's also important to note that these weren't just regular walkie-talkies, but rather discarded airline communication devices that has previously served a real purpose. Betty told David that the plane had crashed, people were injured and presumed dead, and she needed help. David told his family, and of course, they called the police. When first contact was made, Sheldon was the only other person alive alongside Betty. However, when they checked in the next day, she revealed that her son had not survived the night. Another day passed, and although efforts were ongoing, Betty was clearly angry that no one had turned up to save her yet, and disturbingly, the day after that, there was no response on the other end. Betty was gone, and likely dead. Now, years later, David is heavily involved in the search and determined to find out where the plane crashed so that he can finally put this disturbing memory to rest. However, the police did take his walkie-talkie in for analysis, and it proved that it would have never been able to hear and speak to an aircraft transceiver. However, it is likely that there was a GRS walkie-talkie on board the aircraft that survived the crash, and it's unlikely that Betty would have known how to work a proper plane radio anyway, and that's if it was even working. So I really don't want to discount David's story because there are far too many details that line up, and a lot of people that can confirm it as being true, even the police themselves. One commenter actually thought that they may have found a lead, linking Google Maps coordinates of a white object that they thought might be part of a plane. OP says that this is likely just tree downfall, and because it is so close to a campground, it would have likely been noticed way sooner if it actually was a plane. Another commenter also chimes in, saying that they fly a similar model of plane nowadays and it is too small to be a possibility. If anyone is interested in helping to solve this mystery, I'll leave the coordinates of the false lead on the screen right now. With everything taken into account, it is likely near this area. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one who makes the difference.
A few months ago, a Redditor came to the RBI subreddit terrified because inside of their home, they had made a disturbing discovery. I've been renting this apartment for 4 to 5 months now. I am here on and off. My girlfriend lives abroad, so I stay here a month, then go back to my country for a few weeks, etc. Recently, I tried to move the desk in my apartment as I wanted to make a DIY den for my rabbit, and I wasn't using the desk much. This is when I realized it was plugged to something behind the wardrobe. They were next to each other. There was this black wire, and I followed it to a small compartment under the desk where a camera was very conveniently installed and covered in black tape. The camera was basically positioned so that it perfectly records the groin area for someone sitting down on a chair in front of the desk. I guess it could also record the bed, but it didn't have a clear direction towards it and could only record maybe 25% of the lower part of the bed. The camera was fully covered in black tape, except for the small objective, so the light on it wouldn't be visible when turned on. The person who put it here had made sure of this by also covering the whole inside of the desk compartment with black tape and cutting a hole through it only for the objective. I can't explain it better, but the setup was hardly noticeable at all. When I went to the police station, 2 officers drove me to my house and investigated who lived here before me. Apparently, it was an escort who people had filed similar complaints against. Similar from what they said, but they didn't go into much detail. I'm having a hard time figuring out why an escort would use such a setup, and I can't really stop overthinking it. If it was for blackmail, then why place the camera at such a low angle that it couldn't easily capture faces or identifiable features? Why exactly the perfect position to capture someone sitting at a desk? Why a Wi-Fi camera as opposed to a memory card one? The whole building has Wi-Fi, but why would an escort need remote access to the camera even while she's absent? Why positioned in such a place that you could barely capture the feet, legs of someone laying on the bed and not the whole act? The wire was also taped to the back of my wardrobe with scotch, and it's clear from the setup that the desk has always been in the same place. My apartment is also a very small studio apartment, so not much room to fiddle with the bed's position. We're talking matter of inches. I have so many questions about this, and I'd really appreciate some insight. A lot of students and kids have lived in this apartment before me, as it's close to a school, and the landlady's husband would often unlock the door even if I wasn't home or didn't open when he was knocking, just to showcase it to a potential tenant before I had asked him to stop, and tell him that I'm staying here long term. One time, he brought this 14-year-old with her mother to show her the apartment. I'm a guy, so I couldn't really care less if he spied on me, as I got nothing to hide. But as I mentioned, kids lived here before me, which is why the officer's conclusion seemed kind of unthoughtful to me, given the possible threat here. Alongside the post, the OP also attached a video showcasing how the camera was originally positioned. So we've got a camera that can be accessed remotely, and a seemingly purposeful setup to accommodate it, and very little help from the police. Commenters jumped to the conclusion that this was most certainly the doing of the landlady's husband, who OP mentioned had previously entered the apartment without the consent of the tenant on multiple occasions. It was pointed out that this entry alongside the hidden camera would likely be a massive violation of the tenancy agreement, but without OP revealing the fine print of what was stated in the contract they signed, we can't be 100% sure. Tech-savvy Redditors decided to take a deeper look at the camera itself and the setup, and concluded that this was definitely an amateur gig, although they pointed out that it would be almost impossible to trace who was connected to it unless OP had lots of disposable income. They recommended printing out a piece of paper to go in front of it, alerting the person on the other end that OP knows what they are up to. They also urged OP to check the rest of their studio apartment because this camera can apparently be purchased for as cheap as $40, meaning that it's likely there could be more dotted around. As it turns out though, when the situation was investigated by the police, they decided to call up the landlady and her husband to make them aware of what's going on. This is the update the OP finally provided and how they reacted. When the cops called the couple about the camera, which the landlady denied even knowing about it and said it was definitely not them, they were on vacation at a beach. Well, they are apparently back, and today when my girlfriend and I were in front of the building, we saw her husband working in the garage. He went up to us himself and started explaining the situation to my girlfriend in her language. I couldn't understand much, but she translated to me afterward. Turns out that now his explanation is that the camera was owned by some ex-tenants and that it wasn't plugged in. He said the reason it was still in my room is because he refused to give it back to them because they owed him rent money. He also asked where the camera is now. She told him the cops confiscated it, and he said we shouldn't have called the police. Kept a $40 camera to break even with the ex-tenants, and didn't even bother uninstalling the setup before. Seems suspicious to me, especially since the wife denied even being aware of it when she spoke to the cops. Also, he mentioned nothing about that lived there, which the police told us about. This explanation makes even less sense. This update basically proved what we all already suspected, that OP is going to get nothing of use out of the landlady and her husband. They will continue to deny any knowledge of the camera, but through trying to explain how it could have possibly gotten there, they are actually digging themselves a much deeper hole, especially when they are not even taking the adult worker theory into account. OP says that the police took the camera in as evidence and they haven't posted to Reddit since making their update. Hopefully they've been able to move on from the situation and live their life in private.
What if you were out of town and when you get back, your neighbour tells you that they spotted a tent in your living room? That was what happened to this Redditor. I honestly don't know what to make of this. The simplest answer is that my neighbour is lying, but why? Here's what happened. This morning, my neighbour knocked on my door and told me that while I was out of town earlier this month, they noticed my front door was open and that a very nice blue and brown two-person tent had been pitched in the middle of my living room. They said they thought it was a little odd, and that's why they mentioned it. I was on vacation over the 4th of July, and my nephew and another neighbour both fed my cat while I was gone. Neither are the type to pitch a tent in my living room, though, to be honest, I'm not sure who would do such a thing anyway. Nevertheless, I asked them about the tent, and of course, neither knew anything about it. I also don't have anything that's blue and brown and could be mistaken for a tent. My living room is mostly black and white. I also don't even own a tent. I'm not a camper. Nobody has a set of keys to my house. I have an Arlo camera by my front door, and I set one up in my living room while I was gone so that I could periodically check in on my cat. I'm a little neurotic about her because she's very old. I checked all the footage going back to June 4th because my neighbour couldn't say for certain when exactly they saw this tent. Needless to say, there is nothing captured by either camera. Unfortunately, the cameras do sometimes fail to capture everything. I'd say they have a 10 to 20% fail rate when it comes to turning on when there's movement. So there is a slight possibility that someone could have entered my house, pitched a tent, taken it down and left, and the cameras wouldn't have caught any of it. But I feel like it's a pretty slim chance that neither would have been triggered. To add to all of this, my cat has been acting super strange since I came back. She is very nervous, refuses to go anywhere near the back part of the house, and is not using her litter box. So something did weird her out. So, Reddit, any ideas? If my neighbour is lying, which is the most plausible, why? They've never lied before, and always seemed like a reliable narrator. They also said their boyfriend saw it too, and mentioned how weird it was. Is there any scenario where it makes sense for someone to break in and pitch a tent, but also leave the door open so anyone can see? Is it a glitch in the Matrix? Is she somehow suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning? Am I? Thankfully, the Arlo camera outside did capture part of our conversation, so I didn't completely imagine it. It's just so bizarre. I'm just at a complete loss. The whole thing has left me feeling unsettled. Opie also took the chance shortly after making the post to answer some questions that had come up in the comment section. To answer some questions that have come up, 1. I took the cat to the vet and she got a clean bill of health. I'm trying some behavioural solutions, multiple litter pans, special cat food for urine health, calming cat treats, calming spray, fail away plug-in, etc. It's been hard, but I'm committed to helping her get through this. 2. The neighbour and her boyfriend are both older, I think in their late 60s, and we live on the same property, so she has to walk by my front door to get to the street. I'd say from the walkway to my front door is less than 5 feet, so she has a pretty good view of my living room. I agree with those who said that her timing is strange, why mention it weeks later? But I had recently talked to her about my cat's behaviour, so I think she mentioned it as a possible reason for the cat's behaviour. She did say, maybe in the future you should let me know you'll be out of town so I can keep an eye out for you. At the time, it sounded like a normal thing to say, but if she's lying, then maybe it's because she wants to know when I'm gone? My nephew is in his mid-20s and very responsible. He owns his own home and works long days. Neither he nor his brother are campers, and as far as I know, don't own any tents. The camera outside captured him entering and exiting all 3 days, and he was in the house for less than 5 minutes. Same with the other neighbour who fed the cat. She came over 3 times, all for less than 5 minutes. Neither was aware of where the camera was inside. They knew I had one though, so I could check the cat. The camera also caught the cat chilling out in the house, and all 3 days she was acting normally. 4. Today I learned about frogging. There is a crawl space under the house, but you can't access it from the inside. There's probably a 2-foot high crawl space in the ceiling that you can access from the closet in my bedroom, but I have a bunch of boxes and suitcases shoved up against the opening, and I really don't see how someone could put them back if they had crawled back in. I will say that the more I ruminate on it, the creepier it seems. This is extremely strange, so let's discuss the possibilities. It's likely that the neighbours did see something, but simply mistook it for a tent. Considering that people OP knew were in the house while they were gone, there is a good chance that they saw people inside, maybe saw them doing something, and mistook an object for a tent. Admittedly, this does seem unlikely. The other possibility that people pointed out is that they actually did see a tent, but it wasn't in OP's house. It could be easy for them to mistake house numbers, so what if another neighbour did have a tent up, and this is simply a case of confusion? It's also incredibly likely that the neighbour may have dementia or something similar. Although what does stand out as weird is that her boyfriend corroborates the story, maybe pointing towards one of the other options instead. However, OP does mention that the neighbour is keeping a journal where they note down all of the strange things that they have been experiencing recently. And according to a few replies, other commenters recall their relatives doing the same sort of thing when they started to suffer from dementia. The fact that OP has a camera as well does indicate that nothing was actually going on. While it is true that sometimes cameras can miss out on recording movement, it doesn't seem likely that someone would have been able to put up and take down an entire tent without a sliver of footage being captured. One thing that stands out to me though is the strange behaviour of the cat. This does point towards the possibility that something happened while OP was away, but I suppose we could write it off as a bunch of other things, even the cat just missing their owner. There is an update to this story, and this is what it says. So I spoke to all my neighbours again today. The neighbour who saw the tent is still adamant that that is what she saw. She said she and her boyfriend saw it around lunchtime, and he confirmed. They said the tent was up when they went to lunch and down by the time they came back. When I told her my cameras didn't catch anything, she was unbothered. When suggested that maybe she saw something else, she said it was not my imagination. I saw a tent from right here. And then she stood on the walkway and pointed into my house. She seems to think someone might have a copy of my key and is accessing my house whenever I am out of town. She thinks someone sabotaged both cameras and mentioned black suits that aren't picked up by security cameras as a reason that the tent sector wasn't caught. She also mentioned that my other neighbour the one who checked in on my cat, had a large white tent in her yard a few months back. I saw that tent and can verify it existed, but this neighbour said that that is not the tent that she saw in my house. I rechecked all the camera footage one more time. There are no unaccounted for gaps. In fact, there are several snippets of the cat chilling in the living room, looking completely unconcerned before and after the cat sitters came into the house. It's actually making me rethink the timeline of when she got spooked. I rechecked the attic access and it hasn't been touched. I also work from home, so it would be hard for someone squatting in the attic to go unnoticed. I also took the advice here to check the internet data and electricity usage. Both were down on the days I was gone. My gas bill was smaller as well. But if the tent was only up for an hour, that makes sense. So then I spoke with cat-sitting neighbour. She confirmed the existence of her white tent and explained that she was airing it out in her front yard after a camping trip, which aligns with all the tent care information in the comments. She also said that she has had similar conversations with this neighbour, where what she is saying is bizarre and unsettling, but she says it with such conviction that you find it hard not to believe. She also understood my unease, saying that the whole story reminded her of the Manson family and their creepy crawling. Once she mentioned that possibility, it made me understand why I was feeling so anxious. I have read about the creepy crawling, and the Manson family was a boogie monster for me growing up. For those worried about my cat's well-being, thank you. She seems to be slowly coming back to herself. Right now, I'm putting her in the kitchen at night, and she has a cozy little bed where she sleeps. So far, she hasn't peed anywhere inside since I've started doing this, but I do wake up before 6 every morning to let her out, and she promptly uses the litter pan I have set up for her on the porch. I also started using the urinary health cat food from Royal Canin that someone suggested on another thread, and that seems to be working. Fingers crossed. To end on a lighter note, cat-sitting neighbour also had a whimsical explanation, not to be taken seriously and just for fun, that I also thought I'd share. Apparently, there is a Japanese folklore tradition of trickster raccoons who shapeshift and wreak havoc. She pointed out that it is raccoon season where we live, and in fact, I just saw a mother and her babies by my porch a couple of nights ago, and maybe they snuck in and pitched the tent just to mess with me. I mean, it's as probable as anything else at this point. Next steps: asking the landlord to change the locks. And finally, OP provides a final series of updates, and it confirmed to a lot of commenters that one theory was more plausible than the others. This update will probably be more than a little anticlimactic, and for that, I apologise. To the people who felt there was much ado about nothing, I agree, but like I said before, it's her continued insistence and certainty about this bizarre idea that niggles me. So here we go. 1. The boyfriend does indeed exist. I've met him and spoken with him several times. He seems older than her, and is quieter overall. He has stated that he is a cat person and has engaged with my cat in the past, but I have not had the chance to talk to him separately to get his side of the story. The white tent was in the front yard of my other neighbour's house and faces the opposite street, so a reflection is impossible. That being said, the older neighbour does keep bringing it up, and is convinced that people were sleeping in it. I've spoken with the front yard neighbour, and she was airing out the tent after a camping trip. No one ever slept in it when it was in her yard. But I think a lot of folks in the comments are correct when they say the white tent unsettled the older neighbour, because she brought it up several times. I did loop in the landlords, but they seem to also believe the older neighbour. She has rented from them for at least 15 years, if not longer, and they told me that in the past she has been very reliable and truthful. They seemed spooked by the whole story and offered to change the locks. I figured it can't hurt, so I agreed. The landlords and I questioned the older neighbour pretty rigorously, and she stuck by her story, even as we all expressed incredulity. She reiterated that she saw a 2-person tent, blue and white, fully erected in my front living room. She said it was not a pop-up tent or pup tent. She said she saw it on a Wednesday because that's the day that her boyfriend takes her to lunch each week. She said it was up when he picked her up and down when he dropped her off. She got a little defensive as we probed, so people who warned that this could happen if we challenged her were spot on. She kept reiterating that it was a tent and that she could see it quite clearly. She seems to want to pin it on my nephew, and the landlord seemed to be leaning that way too, which is really frustrating. He's a 25-year-old man with his own home. He has no need to air a tent out in my tiny living room, and he doesn't even camp. The cameras. I double checked every Wednesday for the last 2 months. That's the limit for the stored videos. No tent, no people entering my house, no footage of her and her boyfriend staring into my house. That being said, there is one Wednesday with no footage because the battery had died and I forgot to charge it. But I was home. There's only one Wednesday that I went out of town, but I left after 4 PM and returned in less than 24 hours. I still feel like this is pretty solid evidence of no tent, but I have to allow for the fact that the cameras were not fully operational. The cat is slowly getting better, though we had a setback today when she peed in the kitchen after the gardeners scared her. She is consistently using the litter pan I set up for her outside with no problem. She just refuses to use any litter pan anywhere inside. I have one in the kitchen, one by the front door, one in the pantry, and one in the bathroom. She will only use the one outside. I do think the calming food is helping her since we're down to just one accident and it was on the puppy pads. I am keeping her in the kitchen at night and letting her out before 6 AM every day. Hopefully, I can eventually get her to use her litter pan inside. Raccoon season. I think my front neighbour used this phrase because it's baby season right now. We have a mum and 2 kits that hang out in our property. If you have never seen a baby raccoon, then you're missing out. I put one on screen for your viewing pleasure. They are adorable. So, like I said at the beginning, not much of a resolution. At this point, I just want to put the whole thing to rest. I'm changing the locks, so if there are mystery indoor campers or mischievous raccoons with a copy of my key, they'll have to find another locale for their shenanigans. I'll stop questioning the neighbour because she's adamant, and now it feels a little weird to keep harping on it. I'll endeavour to be patient and kind to my cat so that she gets back to her old self. The neighbour and landlords trying to pin it on OP's nephew is certainly strange, and for a lot of people, it did confirm the initial theory that a lot stated, that the neighbour has some form of dementia. Who knows though, maybe OP does have a secret group of people, or raccoons, using their home while they are away. So take this as your sign to maybe do a more thorough check the next time that you hear an unexplained sound in your house. A Redditor was disturbed when a creepy, cryptic letter was mailed to their house. I got this weird letter in the mail with no return address, and it had, what I found out after googling it, a suture in it. I reverse image searched the weird little drawn symbol on the button and nothing came up. It is probably just a prank or something, but I don't know. It's really weird. I don't have any friends or family members who work at hospitals, so I don't think it's anyone I know. If anyone knows what this letter or random letters mean, if anything at all, or know why there is a suture and a random symbol, let me know. I also don't know any James, and the date doesn't mean anything to me. I wasn't even alive then. Very concerning, and all the commenters agreed. According to OP, the letter was addressed directly to their house, but it contained no name. This indicated to people that it was not directed at OP, but rather maybe the people who had lived there before, or just a general prank that could be seen as disturbing. However, OP disputes this, saying that they are the only person who has lived in the house in the past 10 years. So what are the chances that someone would have waited all that time until another occupant moved in to send this letter? It seems unlikely. One commenter brute forced the cipher and came back with this disturbing piece of text, which other Redditors helped to make sense of. Be careful and don't screw the pooch. If you don't watch it for you, and Nico do het, watch backs. he stabs him. A very unsettling message. And some people have compared it to the phrase, snitches get stitches. And it has to be said that it does ring very similar. Some people theorized that this could potentially be a squatter. If the house had been unoccupied for almost a decade, then it would have been the perfect home for someone trying to fly under the radar. And now, they could potentially be having a bit of a mental breakdown as a result of the new tenancy. Another commenter pointed out that this message was dated 40 years to the day after OP received it. This just added to the threat, as it almost read as a precaution. And disturbingly, the story doesn't end there, because OP's update makes the entire situation much more concerning. This all started with a weird letter I got a couple of days ago with a sutcher. I assumed it was a prank, but no. They have slashed my box with cameras and left another weird letter stabbed to the box with a box cutter. I called the non-emergency line and sent the pictures to the police, but they basically said since they didn't take the cameras, they can't really do anything. If anyone has any tips or anything I can do to get the police to take my concerns more seriously, please let me know. Not only was the first letter weird, but it's even more concerning that the mystery person has returned to the residence to leave another, this time leaving a disturbing trail. And clearly, they want OP to know what they are saying, because this time, the letter they left is not locked behind a cipher. It reads, "Cameras are silly when Nico is always watching." This is another letter dated for the 5th of May 1985, so that date clearly has some meaning behind it. And it seems as though the writer realised their mistake last time out, because this time, the message is not written on a printed piece of paper. As some commenters pointed out, paper that is printed has marks left on it that can be used to track down the exact details of what printed it and when. So this time, to be on the safer side, they have instead written their message on a Domino's napkin, leaving the police and OP with no trail back to them. Of course, commenters were immediately concerned. Although at first this could have been written off as a simple prank, this has now entered disturbing territory. This is now, very clearly, a threat. Since the package was vandalised, that means that whoever wrote this letter now has OP's full name, even though they didn't to start with. They also know that there are cameras inside the box and will potentially be more careful going forward. It's definitely wise to keep harassing the police about this because this is a threat and they can't wait until something serious happens to OP before they take action. That's the case with far too many scenarios. Someone has to get seriously harmed before we see real change, and we should be better than that. They provided one more update, saying that the cameras haven't captured anything, and that they hadn't been bothered in the days since. They also confirmed that the police were sending someone out once a shift to make sure that there were no concerning individuals lurking around OP's home. They stopped posting in the months following these posts, but they did return to their usual posting habits. They haven't updated their profile in 3 months though, so we can only hope that they are doing well. A very disturbing story, and one that we don't have an ending to. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share the video, do all of that good stuff if you did enjoy, because it really helps out the channel. Let me know in the comments what you thought of all of these stories and which is the favourite that I've covered on the channel so far. Don't forget to check me out on social media. I have Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, and if you do want to get involved with my community, then you can join my Discord server using the link in the description. Thank you so much to my Jessicur Plus members Maury Gann, Alex Rod, K4 Silver, Entrepreneur, Collectiki, Brooke, Carmilla, Based Finger, Midnight Kitty, Willow, Briar, Fizzy, Shoshka, Frozen Roses, Greenlee, Snail Namgu, JM3112, River Camera, Jaskier, Mary, Shiv the Shrew, Ollie Z, RZ, Riddy Jazz, Mikey Poopy, Elfcore, Goobly Goober, James Rex, Clara, and Finn71. If you want to support the channel, then make sure that you check out Jessicur Plus. For $7.50 per month, you can get access to over 100 videos, some that will never be released on YouTube. And also, you can get uncensored versions of some of these stories with an additional story over there. So go to jessicur.com for more information. And if you're still supporting me on Patreon or YouTube members and would like to claim your additional Jessicur Plus benefits, then reach out to me on social media or by email, and I'll sort you out with your free month to thank you for the support. Also, I know some of you might be disappointed that this is a compilation on Halloween, but I am working on a bigger video where I've got an hour of brand new stories to bring to you, a collaboration with one of my favourite narrators in this space, so if you're into 4chan stories, I think you will like this narrator as well. So trust me, I've got more disturbing Reddit posts coming your way as soon as I can bring it to you. So I'll be back soon with another video, but if you want another right now, then I think that you'll like the video that's on your screen.